Good morning, everyone. Today's speaker is Mr. Ramiro Garcia, the Deputy Executive Director at TCEQ. Mr. Ramiro Garcia earned his Bachelor of Science in Biology from St. Edward's University, Austin, Texas, in May of 1994. Ramiro joined the TNRCC in October 1994 in the Petroleum Storage Tank Division, where Ramiro was he had previously worked as a Mickey Leland environmental intern during the summer of 1993. Ramiro became a team leader in the PST division in 1996. In 2000, Ramiro transferred to the TNRCC Houston Regional Office, PST Stage 2 programs, where he was an investigator and subsequently a team leader until 2005. In 2005, he transferred back to TCEQ Central Office and worked in the Field Operations Support Division Air Section, where he focused on air emissions events. In 2007, Ramiro became a section manager of the Field Operations Air Support Section, and in 2008, he became the area director for the TCEQ Border South Central area, comprised of the following regions: Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, Laredo, and Harlingen. In 2012, he became the Deputy Director of the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. On April 1st of last year, he became Deputy Executive Director of the TCEQ. In 2008, he was a graduate of the Governor's Center Senior Management Development Program, and in 2014, a graduate of the Governor's Center Transformative Leadership Program. Ramiro and his wife, Melissa, have a 10-year-old son. Ramiro enjoys playing golf, fishing, hunting, and staying active to try to keep up with his son. And I certainly hope that he has been able to still enjoy those things throughout the last year. And without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Ramiro, and I will change the slide deck, Ramiro, for you.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. And that's very, very kind introduction. I really appreciate it. 26 years has come and gone, y'all, at a blink of an eye. You know, I always thought that, hey, I'll get my 10 years and then move on. But I really have fallen in love with working at TCEQ and its predecessor agencies. The opportunity to serve the citizens is really what's made it wonderful. But it's also the wonderful people I've met at the agency. Fantastic, passionate people who care about the work. Who, you know, I was testifying the other day at House Environmental Reg, and I said, you know, we firmly believe in family first at TCEQ, but there are times that we know our family will have to come second, and it's what we signed up for, you know, when things happen. So it's what the passion around the regions and in the central office for the job and the hardworking people is what just have made it so much fun. And you know, like I said, 26 years has come and gone in a flash. And also the other thing that's been really great is have the opportunity to meet wonderful folks like y'all in industry, you know, who also want the same things we do and achieving, you know, to comply with the regs. There's a lot of regulations, a lot of complicated regulations, but, you know, wanting to do what's right. So we leave a better Texas for our kids and grandkids. So definitely it's been very rewarding work. And I will say through the pandemic, yeah, it's been fun to be able to spend more time at home and not be part of the Austin commute. It was just about, you know, an hour and a half to get home to Southwest Austin some days. So it's been nice. But yes, I came to the realization that my son can now beat me in a foot race. In fact, at a park in front of people, he was pulling away. So I gave it that last dad gear I had saved up, and I pulled a muscle, strained a quadricep, and came up limping and howling. And a lot of people came around worried because it was quite the scene. So yeah, it's come to grips now that, yeah, my son can easily outrun me. So it's now I got to pull dad tricks like pulling his shirt and, you know, cheating just to try to keep up with him. But it's been a lot of fun. You know, the silver lining of the pandemic, it's definitely allowed us to spend more time, at least for me, you know, more time with my wife and my son, which has been great. So without further ado, thank you again for this opportunity. It's good to be here with y'all. I'll give you a quick overview of the agency. You know, we have 3 commissioners: Chairman John Neerman, Commissioner Emily Lindley, and Commissioner Bobby Janeka. Commissioner Janeka will be going through confirmation this session. So he's nominated by the governor or appointed by the governor and has to go through Senate approval. So that's one of the big things we'll be working on during legislative session is helping helping Commissioner Janeka prepare for his confirmation hearings. On the executive side, Toby Baker is our executive director. Mr. Baker, you know, worked in the past in the Senate and worked in the governor's office, and then came over as a commissioner for us. He's been just a wonderful executive director. He's also got a family, 2 young boys around the age of my son. Cares about the staff, cares about the work, and y'all have probably seen him here recently, alongside the governor during the press conferences, related to the winter storm. Just hit the ground running, and he's just a wonderful leader, and really motivates us to work hard. And because he does, he puts the time in, he works the long hours, and so it's wonderful to have leadership like that. One of the changes that Toby made when he became executive director is, y'all probably remember Stephanie Bergeron Purdue was his deputy executive director. A force of nature, a brilliant mind, a lawyer by background, and just such depth of knowledge, a walking encyclopedia. But Stephanie retired, and so given the amount of work that we've been dealing with, from either disasters to the complicated work, day in, day out, Toby thought, I could use 2 deputy executive directors. So April 1st last year, he offered the job to L'Oreal Stepney and myself, which is a wonderful opportunity. Ms. Stepney, she's a professional engineer by training. She's a rocket scientist, aerospace engineer. So it's another brilliant mind. We both have very different skill sets. She's an engineer, very linear. I'm a biologist, and I'm a big picture guy, type. But we both bring great experience to help Toby and give Toby time to think, because so many things are coming at him. Our job is to divide, the challenges that come up, and then work with him as a brain trust. And it's been working out really wonderfully, because he allows. He wants to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that helps us make these, good, solid decisions. As far as the 6 offices that we have at TCEQ, what we do is we divide them up. So I have the responsibility for the Office of Air, Office of Administrative Services, and the Office of Compliance and Enforcement, my old office. And L'Oreal has the Office of Water, Office of Waste, and Office of Legal Services. And thank you, Lindsay. Spot on. With that, I'll tell you the 6 big offices. Tanya Bear, let me back up. We recently looked at our organization, and the leaders of these offices, they were for a long time called deputy directors, and so I think that was a bit of a misnomer. And we looked at the way other people are organized, said they're directors of the offices. So we did a bit of a switcheroo. So now the heads of the offices are directors, and then within the programs they become deputy directors, which is really, as far as organizations go, make a little more sense. So Tanya Bear is the director for the Office of Air. Earl Lott, with L'Oreal moving up, Earl Lott, a longtime employee, someone I grew up with, started at the agency with me in 1994 in the old petroleum storage tank division. He is now the director of the Office of Water. Brent Wade, also another longtime TCEQ employee, worked out in the field office, was my mentor when I was an area director with Brent. He's the director of Office of Waste. And then when I moved up, that created a opportunity, an opening there in the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. So we hired Craig Pritzloff, who's from the Attorney General's office. He's a lawyer by background, but he actually worked at TNRCC back when we were TNRCC, and then he went off to law school and worked as a lawyer for a while. Now he's come back home to TCEQ, and he's done a wonderful job now, filling the role of the Director of Office of Compliance and Enforcement. I'm really excited, seeing his ideas, because I was the director there for 8 years. So it's good to get new ideas, new thoughts. Next, Miss Erin Chancellor. She is the director of Office of Legal Services. That was before Stephanie was the director there, and then Caroline Sweeney, and then Margie Lagarde. So Erin comes in, long line of very strong directors, and has just also hit the ground running with some great new ideas, takes into the future with legal services. And then last but not least, I call the glue of the agency the Office of Administrative Services, everything from human resources to IT, all the important things, making sure our bills get paid, lights are on, and rent's paid. Kelly Killinden is the director there, and also a longtime employee, worked in the Office of Compliance Enforcement, was actually one of the area directors with me there when I was the director of that office, and another brilliant mind and just a hard worker. So super excited, of where these directors are be taking the agency. It's a very talented group that's just a joy to work with day in, day out. All right, next slide, please, Lindsay. So this one, just 5 big things that came to mind, that things that we're working on, that I'll touch on today. And so obviously the winter storm here, the polar vortex, Uri, I think it had a name here recently. It was really very busy times for us. This is the rewarding part of the job where we can step up and step in and help and serve our citizens. Penalty policy updates that we just recently, the commission just approved. Compliance history rule proposal that we're looking to take on. Productivity during the pandemic, teleworking, something that we had that option before, but we're very office centric. So we've learned a lot this past year, and we're excited about future opportunities, that once we get back to the new normal, harnessing teleworking to help us, continue that productivity and give options to our folks. We had a lot of positive feedback thus far from folks. And then last but not least, the legislative session, big blip on our radar these days. And so I'll touch on those things here quickly. So Winter Storm 2021. Wow. I'm originally from South Texas, from Harlingen, from the Rio Grande Valley. So anything below 40, I vapor lock on you. I don't do well in cold weather. And my goodness, I've lived up here most of my life. I've lived away from Harlingen more than, that I've lived there. But, 7 degrees, I think one night in Austin, and then those, 3 or 4 days of below freezing weather really taxed our system, as we saw. A lot of lessons learned, for us, really things started to heat up that weekend before. And, we were in contact with ERCOT. We allow enforcement discretion for situations where ERCOT predicts a heavy load on the grid. We allow enforcement discretion. That way they can get folks to increase production, and thus, they may go over their, let's say, permit allowables. But in order, if it's related to the emergency, we exercise enforcement discretion in those situations. So with that, we said, hey, it's very important, as y'all saw, already several hearings have occurred now at the Capitol where Mr. Baker testified. So as soon as we could, we had a work session on March 3rd with our commissioners. We invited 3 public water systems to testify, and just to give us their thoughts, lessons they learned. And we learned a lot. One thing I noticed with Round Rock being our neighbor, they fared pretty well. And it's what's nice is that a former TCEQ employee, Matt Baker, he's a city council member there. So he and the city manager came and provided some excellent testimony. But all 3 of the entities that, City of Houston and Canyon Lake, I can't remember the name of the system there, they came and provided very interesting perspective. Large City of Houston, pretty big with Round Rock, and a smaller system. But we saw, general themes here that they had record water usage, during this time that typically you see during the summer. But what they found is, it was due to broken mains, broken pipes at residents. I've heard anecdotally, I think the mayor of Austin said people dripping their faucets. You saw apartment complexes, buildings that were uninhabited because people were at home with broken pipes. The other thing they noted was equipment failure. They had a picture of this huge valve, solid steel, split in half, because of things froze and it just split it in half. So a lot of equipment failure that just wasn't used to having this type of, or enduring this type of weather. The frost line as we know it has maybe changed, and things like that. The loss of power was a big deal. That it was a cascading type of event. So questions that come up that, we feel when we're researching that is, water systems. We think they're critical infrastructure, and we're currently working on that and seeing what can be done to working with the providers to ensure that, these water systems are part of the critical infrastructure that, try to keep power on. But, as you saw, ERCOT had to shed a lot of load quickly. And so they had, tough decisions were made. The other thing is, systems that are required to have emergency generators, there's, was it over 250 connections? They're required to have some type of backup power. And so some chose emergency generators. One thing that was fascinating that we learned from the city of Round Rock is their main intake is at Lake Georgetown. And I think they have like 9 pumps, and they have emergency generators. They spent, was it 35 million over like 15 years, made large investments, tough decisions, but set them up for success in a situation like this. What they found is that their emergency generators were pushed to the limit. They're set up to run 4 to 5 hours, and so what they found was getting fuel to them was a challenge because of the icy roads, getting diesel to them. But they were down to 2 pumps that were working They hadn't frozen up, and the generators were struggling to keep up with. Other things that we've heard from other cities is that their emergency generators weren't winterized. They're fair weather generators. So that's the other thing they've learned is, checking the fuel, ensuring that, they insulate as much as they can so lines don't freeze up. Other things we heard is like chemical feed lines as well for water systems, that they froze up. So, definitely a lot of lessons learned for folks. What we're doing, came out of the work session, is that we've established a work group that will be working on identifying possible regulatory solutions, and working with the water system. So we'll be engaging with the water system statewide to get their feedback, learn from them to see what happened and see, we come up with any regulatory solutions that can help, and be able to be prepared, help them be better prepared the next time this happens. Let's hope it doesn't, but that's part of our job. So, with that, there was a lot of work that went on, behind the scenes, as we saw so many water systems that went under boil water notices because of loss of pressure, loss of power that, caused a loss of pressure or line breaks. One thing we noted was like, hey, they're gonna have to run bacteriological samples as they come off these boil water notices. So we made a call out to the private labs and say, man, could y'all stay open the weekend and maybe work extra hours to get through these? Because we saw a potential bottleneck there. And I got to tell you, the private labs stepped up and they answered the call. They were able to handle all these samples, but EPA was also really helpful, and they provided 3 mobile labs that we put in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio to help also with any samples that came through. So those are things. We have someone that's embedded at the State Operations Center. Her name is Michelle Havelka, and she works in our Critical Infrastructure Division. She's in a leadership role there at the State Operations Center. So having her embedded there helped as these things came up, connecting water systems to their emergency management folks to get the state of Texas assistance request forms put in at the State Operations Center, then to try to find resources to help them find chemicals for treatment, find emergency generators, find equipment, things like that. Our executive director, Toby Baker, spent many hours there as well, helping triage problems. Now, the other thing that was interesting, the last note here is that with the power outages that the state experienced, the coastline, where we have a lot of our petrochemical facilities. So from Beaumont to Houston down to Corpus, they were experiencing power outages. So they had shutdowns. Some went through hard shutdowns. So what was interesting is, our air monitoring network, we kept it up. It was different from a hurricane, but we experienced power outages as well. But what we found is we have some interesting data associated to those shutdowns, and which gave us some insight for our toxicologists to look at. They're always looking at our ambient monitoring stations and looking at what the data is doing. They did see some upticks of data we did have. I mean, we had about 64 stations that went down, but they didn't see anything that was above any levels of concern, which is good. Now, with that, when these facilities shut down, they got to make their repairs and they're going to be starting up. And that's another potential for increased emissions. So with that, it gave us an opportunity that we could position our staff to be out there and do handheld monitoring. We were able to stand our stations, our ambient monitoring stations up pretty quickly. And then we also have the 3 mobile monitoring vans that we put out in the field. So we have some really good data associated to startups that will give us some insight, because as they report these through our emissions event database and they're predicting emissions, we're out there on the ground seeing, okay, what are we seeing in the neighborhoods, what are we seeing in the community? So we've been posting all this data online, which is great too, that we were able to post the information. But I got to tell you, the really cool thing for seeing in action is, we've always had 2 vans that we have their mobile labs. But what they do is when they go out there, they had in the past, they had to park, calibrate. It would take an hour. And as y'all know, plumes move. So you might think you're downwind, but 20 minutes later, it may not be. We asked the legislature for help, lessons learned from Harvey, and they gave us funding last session, and we were able to upgrade 2 vans and get a 3rd van. So our 3rd van is our rapid assessment van. So that one, it's got a different piece of equipment, the DuVos, and it can go out there and assess, and it can in transit get data. And if you look on our website, it's pretty cool. We call it the Caterpillar. You can see as it's rolling, it's getting data, and we put that out there for our citizens. The other 2 existing vans we retrofitted with the SIFT, and that's a larger set of compounds it's able to monitor for. They can also monitor in transit. What's cool is we can get upwind, downwind. And so it really helps us. But in this situation, all vans were in either Corpus, Houston, or Beaumont doing work alongside with our investigators. And the other thing we also had is EPA offered their Aspect plane. So that plane flew regular sorties for us to those 3 areas to gather data. So again, we got some, for lack of better terms, hits here and there, but nothing, our toxicologists reviewed it every day and nothing above concern. And in situations where it may not be even associated to startups, we were able to get investigators to go to the site and investigate pretty quickly to see what was going on. So it's really great. Big difference from hurricanes, because as soon as the ice melted, we can get people on the road versus past hurricanes. It takes a couple of days to get people safely on the road. Waters to recede, debris to be cleared, things like that. So we're gonna have some really good data that comes out of this, but it's all online. Y'all can go to our website under the winter storm tab and see all the data that we've collected. All right, Lindsay, next slide, please. The other thing is the penalty policy. So something we've been working on for a while, and this is on the heels of the big events that occurred at ITC and TPC. We said, look, can't have this. There's something that we're very, very concerned. So one thing we looked at is, okay, our penalty policy. As y'all know, we have statutory limits, based on the different programs that we have. For example, air, it's up to $25,000 per day. We have a penalty policy that takes into other statutory factors that comes up then when we calculate a penalty, be it the duration, the impact, how quickly they come in compliance, their compliance history rating. So that helps us calculate our penalties. What we did is we looked at, okay, where can we make some changes to potentially increase penalties to hold folks accountable? And so that's what we did, and we came up with some recommendations, and we took it to our commission, and it was approved on January 28th of this year. Just some quick highlights, increased percentages in the environmental property human health matrix and programmatic matrix. So we were able to increase the percentages there. In underground storage tanks, one thing that's being an old petroleum storage tank, investigator in person, we always said, when we look at the size of the facility, a major or a minor, we said, anything above 50,000 gallons is a major, anything below is a minor. Things have changed, with so many of these big facilities that we thought, I think to keep up with the times, anything above 100,000 is a major, anything below is a minor, just to keep up with times there. And then one thing we did too, and these are just some examples, and this is all online if you want to go, read it at your leisure, but we had a 20% deferral for expedited enforcement settlement, and which is a good thing, if folks are willing to, to work with us and settle, we provide that 20% deferral. But for cases that potentially under Chapter 7 of the Texas Water Code would be sent over to the Attorney General's office, those that qualify, we send them over, and sometimes the Attorney General's like, what, it's better handled administratively, so we take the lead. But the Attorney General does not offer the 20% deferral. And we thought, well, for these cases that were eligible to go to the Attorney General, but they just didn't take it for different reasons, it was maybe better handled by us, we shouldn't offer that 20% deferral. And the commissioners agreed. So those some ideas and thoughts, that we had to change the penalty policy. And then the other thing that we had is we're looking at, and it's continued, is population density of where the issue occurred. Looking at what's your potential impact, and maybe is there a enhancement there. So we're looking at still ideas on trying to figure that out. So we got some work to still do, but at least we got the big part of the penalty policy updated, and we're still going to continue working at least on considering population density. The other thing is the compliance history rule. I had a slide, but it disappeared. I tell you, that's why technical issues with me on my end. But I'll tell you that the other thing we looked at is during these big events that occurred at ITC and TPC, their compliance history, we run it every year in September. It looks back at their history, and they get a rating. One of the questions we got was, well, okay, it's May or April, and this facility just had a big impact on the community, shelters in place, evacuations, things like that. Surely next week they're not going to be satisfactory, right? It's like, well, they are, because we won't take that look again until the fiscal year, August, September. So a concept that we're wrestling with and looking to start a rulemaking is, how can we change their or take their compliance history into consideration more real time if they have one of these big, Lord forbid, these big events. So we've got some ideas, and we'll be coming forward with some rulemaking here in the future. So keep your eyes open. The teams are working pretty hard on that. And they got some really interesting ideas, trying to fit in the existing framework of the compliance history rule. All right, Lindsay, next slide. Thank you. So like y'all, the big change for us a year ago, March 16th, is when we transitioned an agency of 2,800 folks to teleworking. And given that we wanted to make sure that our staff was safe. And so we've learned a lot. I mentioned earlier, we had folks at telework, but a lot of folks were in the office, a lot of office centric jobs. We're pretty conservative in that regard, but we've learned so much, during this telework time. People have gotten really good at using, we use Teams, but we also obviously use Zoom, but the use of that to get our folks together, to get, meetings with industry folks or citizens, it's really, we found productivity has stayed the same or improved in some of our areas. One challenge that we did find is on-site investigations. That initially was a challenge because rightfully, we were looking to start setting up on-site investigations after we got our feet underneath us. But, let's say a electric generating unit or a chem plant, they're saying, look, we're trying to keep our operators safe. And if we let outsiders in, you could spread COVID-19 amongst our operators, and we have a limited set of folks. So, we honored that. So we did a lot of desktop reviews, but we learned some interesting things like doing virtual investigations, using almost like FaceTime, or just asking the folks to take pictures of components we're interested in. So, we have found ways to make that work, and slowly but surely, we're starting to do, more boots on the ground, but we had a lot of work that kept us going through it. But yeah, it's definitely had an impact on us, but we have found workarounds and been able to still get our work done. A lot of things we did were desktop investigations like Title V, deviation reviews, emissions event reports, things that, still kept our staff busy. And I said, like I said, where we could do it safely, still were able to do some on-site investigations. In fact, some jobs like our water master deputies who are out there in the middle of nowhere checking meters to see, diversions, they actually had increased production because their jobs work really well for social distancing. All right, next slide. And then last but not least is that as far as our big blips on our radar is lots of blips, but these are my favorites as legislative session. We're currently in session now. The big thing we're working on is our budget. Thus far, the Senate and the House budgets were pretty close, and we're pretty happy with the first initial draft budgets. Our big goals for the budget is targeted salary increases. I'll tell you one thing that for me as the director of the Office of Compliance and Enforcement, 16 field offices, is we know we're not going to compete with industry, and that kind of salary is a game changer for our staff, and we support that, and it helps that they go work for industry and they speak regulator, and it helps us communicate better with folks. But what's a little frustrating, like I said, we know we won't compete salary wise with industry, but what's become frustrating is when we lose folks to, let's say, the city of Austin. Here we have a Region 11 office here in Austin, and we lost about 3 or 4 investigators to the city of Austin for better pay. We found, same thing. Harris County was paying pretty well, for example, or we're losing them to other state agencies that are paying better than us. So, we've within our means, we've been trying to, within our budget, do things to try to keep folks around longer. But we've asked the legislature for help there for targeted salary increases. Not just investigators, but also, our enforcement coordinators, our lawyers too. That's another thing that we're trying to figure out things that we can do to pay them, keep them longer. We definitely want folks to make a career here, but also understand, you pay bills, you pay rent, you pay mortgage. Those salary increases mean a lot. So those are something that's very important to us as far as our budget, things that we'll be working on. And, legislature's been good to us, and, they've been very helpful. We've also asking for some additional FTEs, full-time equivalents, in our water program. We have a program of technical experts that, for example, before the winter storm, San Angelo, the city of San Angelo had a chemical that appeared to have gotten in the water system. And so these folks go and they're engineers, they've run water systems before, they work for us, they go in bed with the public water system and help troubleshoot. And in fact, those folks got stuck in San Angelo when things started to ice over, and they luckily safely got home safely. but it's very important, for them to be that technical resource. I mean, we're not going to go in there and run the plant, but at least we can go in there and help bridge the regulatory gap, and also with some ideas to help them as they try to recover. We had folks that were embedded with the city of Austin when we had the big rain events that turned Town Lake to like the Haagen-Dazs looking water. So it's really these jobs, and it's the top Texas Optimization Program. So we're asking for some FTs in that program. Emergency response, we had some big events, so we're asking for some extra money there to help us be prepared to respond to these events. And the last thing I'll touch on is or two more things, is the critical technology upgrades. So in the information technology world, the data system we're on is it's an old language that there aren't many contractors out there that work on it anymore. So one thing that when I became the director for the Office of Compliance and Enforcement, I said, hey, we need to work on this. For us, it's SEEDS is our big database, and it tracks all our investigations, complaints, emissions events. It does so much for us, but the language it's built on is antiquated. So we started this project. It's been a while, but we've made some big strides, with the data center and finding under the umbrella contractors to shift us over to Java, to that platform. It's pretty common. We can get folks that graduate out of college that come work for us that can program that language. So we're asking, for the final push, we're asking for some money in that department to get us there, because it's just not good to be on a platform that it's a language that's not very that's not used, and not a lot of people know how to programming it. So it's main thing is it's helping us be agile and go into the future, as we switch to Java. And the last thing is our optical gas imaging cameras. The legislature's been very, very supportive there. We have a fleet of them. Every region office has them. I think it was last count was 18 or 19, but some are some of the original cameras that from FLIR, and that's just the first producer out there, but that's who typically the cameras we buy. So we have a pretty large set of those that have hit the end of their lifespan. So we're asking for some help there to start replacing some of these cameras, and it's revolutionized the way we do our work because it allows us to see, volatile organic compounds. So those are things that we'll be working with the legislature to try to get some funding. But so far, we're in pretty solid shape. We're very, very encouraged by the initial budget drafts. And then the bill filing deadline is this Friday. So after that, we'll go into bill tracking mode that, bills out there that affect us. So with that, let's see. And I'll close out with two things that as Ms. Renfro and I were talking, two things that we're doing. It's really interesting is L'Oreal Stepney, my colleague, took on diversity at the agency, and one thing that her and Toby talked about is like, we should have conversations about that, that what is it, the Emmanuel Acho and Matthew McConaughey had that, was it uncomfortable conversation with a black man, and it was a fascinating interview. So we got some ideas, but we've had like some coffees, with folks to hear about diversity, and looking at how do we look, we're always striving to hire the right people, but are we recruiting in the right places, through our Mickey Leland environmental internship program? Are we recruiting, in the right places to make sure we bring in folks, get folks interested in what we do at TCEQ? So it's pretty exciting, the work we're doing there. And one thing that spun out of that too is mental health. As we were having one of our teams meetings, with staff, one person is a new hire, and I think all they've known is teleworking. They hired on the agency, after we went into teleworking, but I could just see it in their face. They were lonely, and their roommate, still was going to work. And so this person spent most of their day alone. So, I personally reached out to them, but I took that on as another thing is, mental health. So, monthly messages, we have a lot of good programs at TCEQ through our human resources department to help folks, from financial counseling, marriage counseling to, mental health. And so each month try to send out a message, from different things. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback on that. So we're also doing some really cool things, as far as diversity and mental health go for our employees. And again, the feedback we get unsolicited has been great. People appreciate working in an agency that cares about those things. So those are two other additional things that to me is just has been very beneficial, making TCEQ a wonderful place to work. So with that, those are my comments for today. I'll open up to any questions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ramon. I don't see any questions in the chat at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and fill some open space with the question while we allow people to come off of mute and ask questions. So you mentioned the investigation portion of it, right? And that um, Commissioner Janek and Bobby spoke to us briefly at the end of last year regarding the drone program, and that really piqued some of our interest. And we're going to be looking to Kelly Cook's group, hopefully after June, like later on in the year when they've got it a little bit more together. Do you have any insight into that as far as like investigative work that you want to speak to?
Absolutely. So yeah, that started when I was still the director of compliance and enforcement, and Kelly Cook, was one of the folks in my old crew there in critical infrastructure. If you've never met Kelly Cook, it's an honor to work alongside of someone like Kelly Cook, who's just a workhorse, a machine, and when these disasters hit, he goes into a different gear. But one thing that he approached us and said, hey, we think it'd be good to have a drone program. We see other agencies are doing it, road commission's doing it. And for us, it'd be more of an emergency response initially is what we're thinking. For example, when the West explosion happened, there were some anhydrous ammonia tanks that needed to be emptied. So we had to, hire a contractor to get in there. But one thing we couldn't get was a safe view. A drone would have been perfect to at least fly over and give us a view of where they were and give the contractors, more insight. I mean, luckily, our contractors are amazing professionals. They were able to get in there and offload them safely. But we've had situations too where, for example, river flooding, that results in maybe, along the San Jacinto, sand mines was a big deal after Harvey. So, sometimes we can't safely access the river to see, what's going on. Was a levee breached, things like that. So we've contracted with drone operators to go do flyovers for us to give us that bird's eye view, which is invaluable, for emergency response, but also in, investigations. The number one thing is we're respectful of private property rights. We're not going, just like when we conduct boots on the ground investigations, we're not going to jump fences. We're going to work the appropriate channels to gain access to a property. Same thing with the drone program. We are going methodically through this nice and slow. And really like I said, the initial thing is emergency response. Kelly being Kelly, he did his homework. And so we're, all our drone pilots are certified through FAA, work with TCEQ to get training through them. And so we're slowly building up our drone program. But what's really cool is we're marrying that with our information technology folks with, the GIS resources, which is really giving us some cool insights. So yes, Kelly is foundation wise building a really good program that will help us, be agile in the, here in the future as we respond to events, getting that safe bird's eye view to help us do our job better. But definitely there's a lot, make sure legally we're on solid ground and, being respectful of private property rights. But it's very exciting, potentially we're taking this. We understand that there's some drones out there that have, they mount an optical gas imaging camera on them. They can take samples for you. They might have almost like a ray mounted to them, and they can get some samples and, from bird's eye view, tell you what's going on. So there's a lot of interesting things that are out there as technology is fast, every day is something new. So yes, our drone program it's on its way. So I'm very excited about that.
So thank you. Do any of our members have questions for Mr. Garcia?
Yeah. New Dura is a fraction of the cost. Yeah, the X-Pro team is a really popular, aren't they? Brands that do with like Canyon, for example, although it's an attached warranty. Oh, you go quick, I don't know that. Another downside though is they don't technically own the bike in a lease.
Sounds like somebody's not on mute. Let me take care of that real quick.
Okay.
All right, we're in the pregnant pause part of the conversation. Does anybody have any questions for Ramiro? Do we need to go back to the main slide so everybody can kind of refresh back on the topics?
Well, of course, if y'all afterwards think of any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Be glad to chat.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'll just tell you all, when I started the agency, like I told you, maybe 10 years, I thought, if I retire as section manager, wildly successful. I never thought I'd be sitting here as a deputy executive director. I can't thank Toby and the commissioners enough for the support, but all the people along the way, that I've worked with. It's a wonderful agency, the kid from Harlingen, that ends up being, in a leadership position like this. And I can't thank everybody that I've worked with in the past. It's been truly, like I said, 26 years, blink of an eye has flown by. It's very exciting to be able to serve in this capacity. It's a very, very fascinating work. Never a dull moment.
Well, we certainly enjoy when you come to talk to us.
Thank you.
And over the years, you've had multiple positions when you've come to visit with us. So we certainly appreciate your insights and your willingness to come talk to us periodically. So thank you very much. And congratulations yet again on the transition position. We will put it out there that if anyone wants to reach out with questions directly to you, Mr. Garcia's phone number and email is on the screen. A copy or this presentation, the recording of this presentation will be available later today on our website. And again, if you need a continuing education credit document for attending today's talk, please email me. My email address has been put in the chat box, and I will get to that and send you a copy of that. And as a reminder, our next meeting is going to be scheduled on April 15th. We currently have Carlos Swanke from TxDOT lined up for that conversation. So thank you again, everyone. And Ramiro, thank you and have a great day, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thank you. Always a privilege to come chat with y'all. I really appreciate the hospitality. Thank you.
Thank you.